Great.
going.
Yeah, I listened to Arnold Schwarzenegger's audiobook,
Yep.
and he's basically saying his secrets to success. And I'm not into self-help books and stuff, but I can't remember why I listened to it, but he was basically saying you need the long-term vision of where you're going, because you're constantly facing decisions. Should I take this opportunity? Should I not? If you don't have a long-term goal about where you're going, you can't steer the ship. So that's why it's so successful to come back to what you love as a kid and follow that passion. And that's what you've just started the conversation with, is you're like, I want to follow what I'm passionate about. And it's a little cliche, everyone says it, but it's a method that works.
Mate, 100%. I think the people that, or at least what I've observed in people who are really successful that I've had on the show, is I think there's a friction or there's a resistance that comes naturally when you try to achieve something at a high level, that if you have any kind of apprehension or you're doing it for the wrong reasons, that resistance is just far too great for you to overcome. That it's the people who are genuinely invested in what they're trying to build or who they're trying to become that seem to break through, because it's play.
Yep.
Like they've found the thing that is play to them and maybe work to others. I was chatting to the barista at my cafe this morning, Cody, and she was wearing a Whoop. And I was asking her, I said, "Oh, what do you enjoy the Whoop?" I had one for a few years and found heaps of value in it, and found that then at a certain point it became maybe not as valuable to me because I understood how my body felt, different sleep, and it's beside from the conversation. We're chatting about Whoop itself, and I had the founder and CEO on the podcast back in 2022, Will Ahmed. And mate, he's built I think it's now valued at like 4 billion, that company, right? And has built like 550 employees, massive HQ in Boston. This is a guy who was at Harvard University on a squash scholarship, studying, I think, economics and something government related or politically related, who was just like overtraining all the time in squash. And he's like, fuck, why do I keep overtraining, burning out? Started to go and attend a bunch of classes on health, and was like figuring out that it was strain, rest, and recovery that really determined whether you progressively overloaded too far into burnout or were able to recover enough to progress. And he just started to become really invested and was like, how can I track this? Comes up with the idea for Whoop. And when I sat down with him, he's in Boston, so it was 5 p.m. Boston time, 7 a.m. Australian time. I've got fucking bags under my eyes because I didn't sleep well the night before. Obviously wasn't checking my Whoop. And he sat down in front of me. His team was setting up his Zoom call for him. He walked in. He was so polite to every single person in the room, acknowledged every person that had helped him set up, thanked them all, jotted down a bunch of work notes for them. They left, and I thought straight away, like I've interviewed busy people before in the middle of a busy day, and they're just not present. And from the minute he looked at me, Mike, I did not lose his focus. He was locked in for 2 hours at the end of a busy day, managing 500 plus staff. And I was like, that is so impressive. And I asked him how, and he's like, because I've optimized my life for the thing that I love. And I was like, oh man, that's a lesson for all of us.
Yeah. I didn't even know what a Whoop was. I'm guessing it's just in tracking your internals and
yeah, that probably would have been valuable context before I told you that whole story.
I think that the issue that I would have with that personally is that I might get too involved in the metric, and then but like when they had the sleep tracking thing, and there's that whole new thing where people are stressed because they wake up and they realize they didn't have good sleep because they saw it on their watch and it keeps them up. That'd be my only thing, but I'd still give it a crack. But that I think that might be my thing.
Well, it's similar to that. So it's a fitness wearable where it doesn't have a face. And so that was like an intentional decision they made when they began the business. Like if we have a watch face on this thing, we're immediately competing with Garmin, Apple, etc. So it was, let's engineer it in a way in which it gives us better information through a trackable app than any other of those devices do on, training, recovery, and performance. But we'll focus in on, making it without a watch face, and it looks a little bit more just like a band.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, you're right. Like I think for a person who is like maybe like over obsessed with metrics and becomes, like gets in their own head about that, it'd be horrible.
Yeah.
Well, I found at times it wasn't valuable because I'd wake up and basically the app in a more eloquent way is telling me, fucking awful sleep and you really shouldn't do anything today. And I'd be like, I kind of plan to run 15K, so I'm running 15K.
Yeah. And then the other thing about Arnie's book is he's like, just suck it up.
Yeah.
Buttercup,
Yeah.
don't worry about that. And that's certainly something which the military is good at doing, is pushing and going, okay, you're totally stuffed and tired, but you're going to go anyway. Aviation is very different to other parts of the military. But yeah, I can certainly see some good things out of that kind of device.
So tell me, mate, like aviation itself, but aviation in defense, like 20 years, I think it was you spent in the
Yep.
Defense Force.
Yep.
What initially, like when you think about young Mike, were you immediately like, this is the thing I want to do in my life and dedicate myself to?
Yep. Pretty much. I'd say, when I watched Top Gun, I think I must have been, I don't know, when that came out, 86, I must have been about 10 or
Yeah.
something. So that was fairly pivotal. Another time choppers and fighter planes are just cool. Another time I was camping up in the Snowy Mountains doing my first kind of big expedition. And I went to do a whiz at the top of this Mount Tate, it's called. And this formation of 5 army squirrels came past in this close V formation just beneath the height that I was at as the sun was rising. And I was like far out. So there's just a few pivotal moments. You hear like the most common one is kids go to an air show and they just go, man, that's the coolest thing. I mean, I cannot see a fast jet go past and just not be awe-inspired. It happens every time. Even like, I was at the Willietown for 2.5 years flying fast jet, and just I was refueling because I live next to Willietown because I bought a house there when I was posted. And just the sound of the jets going over, it's just like, man, that is so cool.
Yeah,
you can't replicate that experience. So they're actually cooler on the ground than when you're in the aircraft. You're just seeing kind of the same view in the cockpit view. The sound is mostly constant because there's no Doppler effect. When you're on the ground, you got, it's high pitch and then it goes past you and then it's low pitch because the sound waves, But when you're in the plane, it's pretty much mostly the same sound. Unless there's like, when you put the throttle up, you're going to hear more engine noise, but there's no Doppler effect. So some ways you can be almost a little bit detached, but on the ground is one of the coolest place to see a chopper as well. So yeah, a low flying chopper is so cool to see on the ground.
It's crazy to me the way that the jets land, like when they land, on the water base. What do you call that? Like when they've got the runway out in the middle of the water?
Aircraft carrier.
Yeah, like an aircraft carrier. Maybe it is where they land. Like you see them land on an exercise or after a mission, and they've got the ropes that catch it.
Oh yeah, on an aircraft carrier. Yeah.
That to me is insane.
Yeah, that's cool though. Yeah,
yeah, it's so
awesome.
Cool. But you're like the fact that it's caught by a rope and it can land on that short of an air on a landing strip.
Yeah,
is insane to me.
It is. It's awesome. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
I wonder, like when you think about the classic fighter pilot or the fighter jet now. When did they develop them to look like that? Because you hear about, like, I've read a few books that are based on World War II, and you hear about, like, the German U-bombers and, how valuable they were to a lot of Germany's early success in the war. And you think, obviously, we've come a long way since then. Like, how have these aircrafts changed?
Well, they were basically, the end of the Second World War, I think it was the Germans made the Me-262, which was they were all rushing to make the jet engine plane during the war, and it only just started to come out. So I think the Brits dogfighted this first jet at the end of the Second World War. Then that ended, and then kind of the Cold War began, and that's where the development happened. But the change to the pointy shape is a supersonic thing. Before that, if you're subsonic, you don't really need the pointy wings. So
explain that to me, subsonic versus supersonic.
So speed of sound is subsonic.
Okay.
Supersonic above the speed of sound. And when you break the speed of sound, a shock wave develops from the leading edge of every part of the aircraft, effectively. So the wings are swept back, so they're not in the shock wave created by the nose of the aircraft.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a whole thing that people do degrees and stuff on, but that's the simple version of why they're so pointy.
Yeah, wow.
So even when in civil aviation, when you have an aircraft that people want to sell and make look really cool, they don't generally sweep the wings back because they don't go fast enough to need the wing sweep.
Okay. That's interesting. And so was there ever a part of you that thought maybe, with fascination in aviation and aircrafts, whether you thought about not going down the pilot route, but going down the engineering route?
No. I mean, I love making stuff, but it would be so frustrating to make it and not fly it. So that was a very easy choice.
Yeah, fair. I feel like that world. I had Kate Reed. Do you know Loon croissants?
No.
You don't look like the kind of bloke who eats too many croissants. So I would assume you didn't. But Loon is like an amazing, like they've kind of innovated and perfected the croissant. At least this is what a lot of foodies say. And Kate, who is the founder of Loon, well, co-founder alongside her brother Cam, She was a guest on the podcast. She had an amazing memoir come out in the last couple months, and she's a former aerospace engineer at Williams Racing in the F1. And I find it so fascinating, like the way her brain has transitioned from creating and crafting certain parts of an F1 vehicle to then crafting a pastry.
Yeah.
And like that dedication and focus to that one thing that's actually been transferable into other fields.
Yeah, for sure. I think though for aviation, it would be so frustrating to make something and then not be able to fly it. Like it's almost not fair that pilots get to fly the cool thing and you get paid more, you get more leave, like in the military. Like yeah, it's kind of the best of all worlds. So yeah, it's an awesome job.
So how old were you when you went in?
Oh, I left. Well, it took me 3 goes to get in. So I applied out of school, assumed I'd get in, didn't pass because I kind of I was fine in all the tests, but one of the tests I had some negative habit transfer from a computer game that I'd played, and I failed one of the tests, so I had to wait a year. So then I joined the Airforce as something else, and then applied again, didn't get in. So it took a while before I got in. So I don't fully remember that question there, but yeah, it's not like I just left school and went straight.
Yeah, okay. So you're what, early 20s?
Yeah. By the time I kept applying for the Air Force, didn't get in, and I did the Air Force for a year as a ground job, and then I travelled for a year, and then I did uni for 2 years, and it wasn't until the second year of uni that I managed that the Army opened up for pilot applications. The Air Force was just not recruiting, and then I got to the Army and always thought I'll go across to the Air Force, and then yeah, it took me about 10 years to get across, which is quite an unusual thing to do, and there was definitely some luck involved.
So when you apply to be a pilot in the Army or the Air Force, are there a certain, prerequisite skill set that you need to have or a certain amount of hours flying under your belt?
Definitely, there's no hours flying. The main thing they're looking for there, you don't need to have been in a plane even, but
Wow.
what they like is someone who's gone out and at least flown in a glider or something to see whether they like it or not. Now, there's quite a few people that join up that have a lot of civilian experience, but they would prefer really to train your brain from scratch. It's a little bit like if you went to another country and you learnt the language and you didn't learn it the right way, but you're in the habit of speaking that way, that it would be hard to train you from scratch to speak perfectly. It's a little bit like that with aviation. So yeah, some level of motivation though you can prove to them by the fact that you've been flying a few times. So
Kind of like trying to teach an Aussie how to speak in perfect English. We're too far gone, mate.
oh, exactly. And aviation's like that. But some people, yeah, there's certainly people. There's a guy on my job, of course, absolutely top bloke. He was a commercial pilot, had about 400 hours, and those bad habits meant that he didn't get through the course.
Yeah, wow. It's crazy how it can be so, especially with an aircraft like that. I can imagine there are nuances that are so different.
Well, it's so exacting the way that you do it. You literally almost the way you think needs to be bred into you the correct way from the beginning, and yeah, it's hard to get rid of old bad habits.
So at this point, like you joined the Army, and I know that because I've listened to you on a few podcasts before that, you were interested in these survival expeditions or being out in the wild and, immersing yourself in nature. I know that very early in your defense career, you skied across Iceland.
Yeah, yep.
Where does that bug come from?
Okay, a couple of things there. So I watched the Bush Tucker Man as a kid too, at about the same time that I saw
I feel like
Top
Bush
Gun.
Tucker Man. I'm trying to think what that is.
Oh, so he was this army major that went around legitimately in probably the 80s and 90s collecting bush tucker for the army. He studied at James Cook University, and anyway, this TV show, basically ABC TV show, followed him around, and it was awesome because he just go to these remote communities, find bush tucker, study it, send it back to the lab. He had good relations with Aboriginal people and stuff. Yeah. So I saw that and thought that was cool. And so I wanted to do both of those, and military aviation is a young man's game. So I thought I'd do that first. But then I thought, whilst I'm in the military, that's the perfect way to get experience in survival. So I did the normal aviation survival, aircrew survival courses. And then when I got to Darwin, where I was flying the Kiowa helicopter, then I started finding out about other survival courses that were run in a unit called an Airforce, and that's where you learn the really good stuff about how to live off the land. So I just wanted to do as many survival courses as I could to get cred for when I left to follow my second goal, which was to make films about survival. So a snow survival course came up, and I'd already done lots of skiing as a kid. I actually did a year of ski instructing as well before joining up. So I did that, and I started taking groups across the snowies, and then I used those skills to take leave without pay and skied across Iceland solo and just kept pushing those kinds of things because I've always wanted to just find my own boundaries. You read the adventure books about people that have done crazy stuff and you're like, I wonder how I'd go in that situation. Lots of people have that desire and I just wanted to follow it through. And so when I finished that Iceland expedition, I was 30, and that's kind of when I finished that, I thought, you know what, I've now done quite a few expeditions. I'm now a survival instructor and stuff. That's when I've probably got enough cred now that I wouldn't totally embarrass myself if I started making content about that. So it was really, I was trying to make content in defense, like outside of defense, but like trying to get a TV show off the ground with the ABC whilst I was still in defense.
Okay.
And
was that difficult?
Defense was fairly open to the idea. It's more that I did expeditions and I did pilot episodes and I pitched it to the ABC and stuff through a production company. It never ended up coming off. And that's where I actually discovered that if I was to make something via a normal television approach, that it would get so twisted by producers and networks that I realized then that the perfect solution would be to film yourself. So it is a hell of a lot more genuine. And just the fact that you don't have a camera crew, like if you're going to go out and say that you're out there solo and you've got a camera crew, well, you're not solo. To be solo, you've got to be by yourself. So, and that's why so many people are successful on YouTube doing adventures, like proper adventures by themselves and filming them themselves. You just can't replicate that really with commercial television very easily.
Who's that guy that became like a global phenomenon? I'm pretty sure he is from Northern Europe somewhere. He wears like glasses.
Oh, that's probably the Outdoor Boys. He's American.
Yes. Oh, he's American, is he? Yeah. He looks like he's from like Finland or something. I don't know.
He does. Yeah. He's kind of not dorky, but he's really cool. Great knowledge.
Didn't he just finish up? Like he stopped his channel?
He felt like
I've never watched this guy, and I know this. I don't know how, but I feel like the online world was like devastated because people love this guy.
Yeah. He was putting out an episode almost every week, I think, for 5 or 10 years straight. And then he dropped back to, okay, I'm going to do just 2 a week for about a year. And then he quit. And he was getting so big that everywhere he went, he was getting recognized. And he just felt that that was too much of an impact on his life. So he left. I think his kids just going to take it up.
Credit to him. Hey, that's a big call.
Yeah. And what was so great, though, it was just genuine. And it wasn't fancy, but he was doing legitimate stuff. You learned some things. He didn't make a fuss. And I think if I was I'm going to go do more YouTube this year, like going into full-time YouTube, and I'm basically just going to follow his approach rather than, so I've made a couple of feature films now, and really to edit stuff takes such a long time. You really just keep it all linear. So keep everything that happens in order. You don't need fancy. You just got to know when's a good time to turn the camera on and when you're just filming stuff that's repetitive and boring. Get home, bung it into a close enough approximation of a good storytelling. Maybe that's like an 80% solution that takes you 1 week instead of trying real hard for another 3 weeks to get it up to a 95% solution. Bung it out, go on the next adventure. So that's my plan.
It's my family and my mates will laugh at this when they hear me say it because I don't think I have a survivalist bone in my body, mate. I am, mate. First of all, I'd be a disaster. I know you've been on Alone Australia and they give you 10 things that you're allowed to take out with you. Mate, my list of medications, I'd already be fucked. That'd be I think I've got 12.
Well, so the only thing there is that this is what the army drums into people, which is the most important thing in a survival situation is the ability to maintain a positive mental attitude. And I think you'd excel in that area.
Well, there you go. Maybe I would be better than I think. But I love, mate, there's a part of me, I think it's something prehistorically or ancestrally, I should say, that is built into us as human beings, that when I'm, doom scrolling through Instagram and I see one of those videos where you never see the dude's face, but he cuts up a bit of wood from a tree, plonks it down, creates like a rotation system to fire grill a chook that he's just caught out in the bush, and he's chopping up all the herbs. I'm sure you've seen those videos. There's something about that makes me want to fucking howl at the moon and go into the trees. It is something aspirational about it.
Yeah, and every human evolved in the outdoors for most of evolutionary history. So we're used to seeing that. So it's normal that it fires off the reward centers of our brain.
I loved as a younger guy, and still to this day, but I remember being a younger guy, me and my dad sitting behind the telly watching, I think it was Nat Geo on Austar, back in the old Austar days. And do you know Tim Noonan?
I do.
Yeah, so Timmy's show, Boy to Man.
Yes. So I listened to your episode with Tim, and Tim was
Oh,
the
there you go.
director of photography that I learned some great stuff off about solo filming. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. He's such a great man, Tim. He's a legend, and I don't know. Did you hear that at the time, or just in like scrolling recently?
What when I listened to Tim? Oh, so well, I first became aware of Tim when he was the director of photography. He did the instruction for the people that
Yep.
were going to solo film on
On
Alone
Alone.
Australia,
Oh
and
wow.
I assume they chose him because he'd done all of those solo filming
Yeah.
stuff, and he's got a massive experience with commercial TV and Spotlight
Mm.
and stuff. So because of that, I went and watched Border Man and that
So
kind of thing.
good.
Yeah, it's
So
great.
good. I loved it. Me and Dad used to sit down every week, and I love that show. And I always thought he obviously had one guy with him at all times,
Yeah,
and slightly different show. Not so much survivalist, but showing you the insides of what life is like inside of those tribes. But there's something cool that like when we live a very different experience to that. And for me, I remember at the time thinking it is so crazy that in a on a parallel timeline to the one that I'm living in right now, I'm sitting on a couch with a gas heater beside me and a warm cup of tea in my hands, watching this guy who's currently on the other side of the world somewhere, living with a tribe that's lived like they have for thousands of years, and this is the same day and age. I just found that fascinating, and I think that's what the survival or the sort of content that you do reminds us, that there is this other life that exists right now that is
yeah.
so different to ours.
And you can move between both worlds. Like you can be good and interested and half proficient in one thing and
Mm.
also at another. So you can like I can be proficient at lighting a fire with no matches and stuff and handle myself in the outdoors, and I can fly a helicopter at low level using the
Mm.
latest sensors and stuff like that. So the human brain is incredibly adaptable, and really they're doing similar kinds of things. They're just dealing with problems, learning how to prioritize. So yeah, the brain's amazing. The most important thing I learned from Tim was when I came to Alone Australia, and he must have seen some of my stuff, and he goes, "Hey Mike, I love your stuff. What you're doing is great, but you've got to realise that when you're on camera, a lot of the time you are presenting." And so what he means, or what I take that to mean from him, is if I'm going to give a 5-minute brief to people in the military about how to do a skill like how to fly a plane or something like that, how to stall an aircraft, I would, in my mind, prepare what I'm going to say, and I would get in front of them and I would tell them for 5 minutes about the thing that they need to learn. I would be presenting, and there's nothing wrong with presenting. When you're making content for things like YouTube, you want to not present. So if you tell the audience, I'm going to show you how to light this fire, that's less engaging than someone that just has the camera on, decides that I'm pretty buggered. I might just light the fire, and they light the fire, and they're not presenting to anybody. They're just living in their own space. You're effectively the camera's a fly on the wall, rather than an audience member that you're talking to. And constantly, I remind myself of that when I'm stuck about how should I do this. I'm like, don't present. Now, there's definitely times when you present. Like I'm doing some public speaking tonight, and I will present because there's a certain thing, particularly with public speaking, where you do need to kind of, stand up a bit straighter, because I slouch all the time, and make your voice louder and speak a little bit slower so people can understand you. But when you've got a camera and a mic that's close to you, you can talk softly and you can mumble and you can make mistakes. Mistakes are good because they're human. So just getting in your mindset, I'm not going to present, is the most important lesson I've learned in content creation.
It's actually a very interesting point you make, because I the other day was thinking about this. Like I said, I've done this for 300, and you'll be episode 303 when you come out. And for me, I love it. And I find that when I look back on my best conversations, the ones that I have left the room and gone, man, that was amazing. That was such a fun chat. There's almost a feeling that it's less of an interview and it's more of a conversation.
Yeah.
It's almost like if the goal was, can I leave here today and have created somewhat of a friendship with Mike? Like the way that conversation flows is so different to the mindset of, I'm sitting here to interview or extract something from Mike. And I find that for me, I almost think when you were explaining that then, I guess for you is the goal to almost pretend you're in conversation with someone who's there,
Yes.
because you're not explaining it to them, you're just experiencing it with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know how like you don't have a start for your podcast.
Yeah.
There's an advantage there. Is that okay? Now we've started, and that can put you in a mindset of
Mm.
presentation. You know,
Yeah.
like if you said, "Okay, mate, we're going to start now," and which is what I do. Like it's just a creation
I do it
style.
sometimes too, which I
Yeah,
think, yeah.
sometimes it's quite appropriate, but there's benefits in not doing it because hey, this is just an extension of the conversation, and
Absolutely.
yeah, so it gets you in a good mindset. So when you're out in the bush, it really does help if you're starting a video or some kind
Mm.
of content to at least say what's going to happen in the video. Aside from that, though, it's best to just try and forget and let things just roll.
Oh, 100% I agree. It's interesting when you were talking about North Force. So what I'm aware of North Force from hearing you on, I think it was No Limits with Matty Morris, is it?
Yep.
You were talking, it's predominantly an Aboriginal unit. And so obviously their understanding of the land and bush tucker and survival out in the land is second to none. I remember watching a program years ago, and I'm 99% sure it was in the top end, and they were finding honey underground.
Yeah, probably in ant mounds.
So explain that to me. Have you come across that yourself?
Yep. Yeah, so I was with shown that by traditional owners on Cox Peninsula. So the native bees, one of the crazy places they choose to nest is in termite mounds. They're really hard to spot them going in and out. And I actually went back to the place afterwards, like a few months later to try and find them. I couldn't find them. Like you really have to train your eyes to be able to spot a native bee because they're the size of a bush fly. They look like a bush fly actually.
Oh, really?
And so they knew the area, and so we turned up there, and they just like stared at the base of this termite mound, and then nothing would happen. So they go to another one, and they just stare for like 2 minutes, and they go to another one, and then they go, "Oh, we got one," and then this lady dug out the nest effectively, which is just this. It looks like poo. It
Yeah.
looks like a sloppy poo. It's like this brown wax. It doesn't have a crystalline uniform structure like European bee honeycomb, although part of the hive does, the brood part of the hive does. But anyway, it comes out, it tastes great. And so it's not just the honey that's great, it's the wax is really useful. And so normal beeswax, it's mostly just wax for European bees, but native bees incorporate a lot of sap, tree sap, into the wax and to make what's called propolis. Apparently European bees do it too, but not nearly as much. So in the center of the hive where it can be soft, it's very pliable wax that you could use as a candle. But on the outside of the hive, they put more wax in. So it is more like a hard glue. And you use that for like sealing spearheads and stuff like that.
Oh,
So you can
wow.
basically choose the kind of bush araldite that you want, all just from the wax and how much tree sap is incorporated into it.
Is it a different nutritional value to that honey? Like when you think about calorically or the benefits of it?
I've read that it's got antimicrobial stuff. I don't know. I've never really got too much into that stuff. You don't get that much honey either. Normally they make about,
Okay.
you kind of get 1 litre of honey out of a native beehive compared to about 20 out of a European beehive. But yeah, there's a lot of good things about it. And but the main reason I want it, I keep the wax rather than the honey. I mean, of course I eat the honey,
Yeah.
but I want the wax.
Yeah, wow. Did you enjoy that time with North Force?
Yeah, and I was only an instructor there, so I was a helicopter pilot in a unit up there, and I managed to just get my way onto this course, and then I would go back again and instruct on subsequent instructor courses. So it's not all Aboriginal people, but it was started by this guy called Donald Thompson, effectively in World War II or the 1930s. He just thought, isn't it crazy that we're at World War and Aboriginal people have such a good understanding of the bush and we should be doing patrols with Aboriginal people, and that's how the unit started effectively.
So where were they patrolling? Because, I know that we got attacked at the top of Darwin, like the bombing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the unit now is designed so that if there's some threat or something that needs to be reconnoitred in the middle of nowhere for a long time on the coast, they can send out one of these patrols and they can be out there for weeks, months or whatever. And the reason we do the survival courses is sometimes you can either find yourself by yourself, or maybe there's a world war and you can't get resupplied, but now you know how to live off the land. And so what's great about that is, and what I really like about North Force is it's based on that Aboriginal understanding. It's not like the G.I. Joe survival's a knife in your teeth and you're going through and you're stabbing pigs and stuff. It's not really like that. It's just more of a common sense thing. And they just do cool stuff like lighting fires without matches and spearing fish and all that stuff. That's the cool stuff that I love.
Do you use some of that technique still now when you go out? Like,
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
because I know you fish a lot, like a lot of the stuff that you do, especially recently, you've been on a raft. I think when I messaged you to get you on the show, you'd just been out on a raft for a couple of weeks, just floating around the fucking harbour somewhere.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So I'm really interested in the things that Aboriginal people did. I don't copy everything that they do. Sometimes I make my own stuff up, but so I really enjoyed learning how to throw a spear with a woomera, a spear thrower. In the States, they call it an atlatl.
Oh yeah, it's like a long thing. It's got the little so sort of like it's almost, it looks like a triangular shape when you're throwing it.
Yeah, well, it's long and straight. It's maybe sort of 60 to 100 centimeters long.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a hook in one end and a spike. The spike goes in the back of the spear. So when you throw the spear, it's like having another forearm that can add leverage, power,
Nice.
and also accuracy. So
Are you more accurate with that?
yeah, because normally, like if you throw a ball and it leaves your hand here, you can't affect the ball anymore because it's left your hand. When you got a woomera, the spears come out of your fingers here, but this whole leverage here is still acting on the spear, so you can make little adjustments for much longer. So yeah, it's more accurate and hell of a lot more powerful.
Yeah, I can imagine get some pace up.
Yeah, massive pace.
Like bring them in a javelin in the Olympics, man. We're breaking records left, right, and centre.
Absolutely, yeah. And then when you're spearing too, it's not just being accurate. You've got to be able to judge the refractions because the light bends as it goes through water because it's a different density. So basically, you've got to aim lower than the fish to be able to get it. And how low you aim depends on the angle to the fish, how deep the fish is. So fish are a pretty small target too. So it's so challenging to do. But when you do it, it's like one of the most rewarding things you can do.
Mate, I've got I'm probably the worst fisherman you've ever met. I remember my first ever fishing experience. My old man took me out. I was 6, and we're living near Wollongong, so we had the jetty down at the harbour there, and that's I feel like that's a seminal experience, like to go fish for the first time. You fish off the jetty in the harbour, and Dad took me down. We lived in Berkeley, which had like a fish co-op down on the lake, and so we went down. We got some bait. I've got my hat on, my fishing gear, new fishing rod that I got, I think, for my birthday or Christmas. We go down to the jetty, cast out into the water. We're sitting down, and we're about half hour in, and there's just all these other people around us on the jetty just catching fish left, right, and center. We're like getting nothing. Next minute, just covered in pelican shit, head to toe. And I'm like, I look at Dad, wipe my eyes, like wipe the pelican shit out of my eyes, and we just start pissing ourselves laughing. And we're looking up in the air. We're like, where is this bastard? Couldn't see it anywhere. We're cracking up. And he had wet wipes, and so he's wiped me down. We laugh, and we're like, all right, we'll cast out again. We cast out again. Mate, 30 seconds later, bang, round 2, just covered in shit again. And we were like, we couldn't even talk. We were laughing that hard, rolling around. We looked up. It's a fucking telegraph pole overhead. Nice. And so this thing had just got me twice, the easiest target ever. And mate, I reckon we moved around to 6 different spots that day, watched everyone around us collect buckets of fish, and we had nothing. Between me and my old man, we'd be a goner if we had to fish for survival. Yeah. We've always been awful.
Well, sometimes, yeah, a bit of local knowledge can mean all the difference. It could be, it could be the bait, it could be the depth of the water, the colour of there's a million things you can just get wrong. Sometimes you can just get lucky though.
Oh, mate, a bit of good fortune for sure. So tell me, you've done, like, I know you've skied across Iceland, you've done stuff out on the Barrier Reef, like you've done stuff inland in Australia, and I know you've done Saudi Desert. Like when you think about those expeditions, what is it when you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to head out and I'm going to make a new film, or I'm going to at least collect some footage and have one of these experiences? What are you searching for in the right destination, the right kind of challenge?
It depends where I'm at in life and where I happen to be living. So normally I've got like this big stash of goals that one day I'd like to do. So that Iceland one came up because before Google Maps was invented, we had this military app that did something fairly similar. And I found that Iceland looked cool on Google Maps, and I thought, I wonder if you can get through there. So that's where that idea had come from. So if I'm moving to a different part of the world, like in Saudi Arabia, I'm thinking, right, I'm in Saudi. I'm only going to be here once. What's the coolest thing I could do? And I'd always had in my mind that I wanted to do a camel expedition. So normally I've got a list of 3 or 4 things that I really want to do next, and then I go, where am I going to be next year? Okay, I don't want to just do an expedition. I want to kind of make it a bit more interesting. What resources do I have at hand? Then, because having a historical context to compare my own experience to is useful in a storytelling context. So then I'm looking at survival stories in the area and then going, how can I, put one of those into this situation and have it make sense. And then once I pick that idea, then it's like, right, okay, it's like the barrier reef one, for example. Okay, I want to escape from this shipwreck survivors situation because I'd always dreamed about building a dugout canoe. I wanted an excuse, right? And I'd just done an expedition in the Saudi desert and it was hot and sandy and I was dreaming about beautiful turquoise waters and coconut trees. So I was like, okay, I need a dugout canoe. I found a story that fits. Okay, now I'm going to go up there. Right now I really need to start understanding the history. So researching the Aboriginal history, I did a recce up there, spoke to traditional owners, learnt more about what they would have done. Also just, asked for permission and all those kinds of things. And then I'm studying other techniques. Did they even have glasses back then? How would they have lit a fire? So there's lots of research that goes in as well. And then it's like, far out. I mean, I watched Malcolm Douglas throw a spear at a fish and he's the only white fella I'd seen on camera spearing a fish. And I'm like, well, I better learn how to do that. So I spent a year and a half learning that skill. So I'll choose skills in advance that I need to have for that expedition. And that's really interesting as well. And so often now when I'm making content, shorter content for social media, one of those skill journeys I'll just put out as a reel about my journey doing something or learning this skill. That's the same with, I'll put one out about how to transfer a fire with Banksia seeds. I'd read about it and I just thought, righto, I'm going to experiment. So yeah, it gives me an excuse to learn little skills, but then also an excuse to put all those into one big adventure and see if the whole thing works.
So skills aside, do you think about, like, if you're going to walk across the Saudi desert or, really whatever it is, like if you're moving for long periods of time, do you have like a fitness protocol or a training regime that you'll prepare your body for that kind of endurance?
No. And there's two reasons for that. One, if I'm recreating or the start conditions of a a survivalist that's gone through something, I kind of feel that's cheating unless I knew that they were big and fat. Like this shipwreck survivor, for example, he was just a normal guy. So I felt that would have been cheating. And also there's another really probably the most well-known Australian adventurer called John Muir. And I use his technique, which is basically just do smaller days at the start of your expedition and then work your way into it. Now, there's certain things that you don't want to, you still want to be generally fit and have all your muscles and tendons so they're not going to rip and stuff like that. But I generally don't do fitness training for anything. I just try and maintain a healthy level of fitness.
You're like the Daniel Day-Lewis of survival expeditions. As method as it gets, mate.
I don't even know who he is.
You know Daniel Day-Lewis, the actor?
I think I've heard the name.
There Will Be Blood, Gangs of New York. He was Bill the Butcher.
Nah.
Oh, you'd recognise him. He's been in so many great movies. I think he's won
cool.
like 4 Oscars or 3 Oscars for Best Male Actor. But he talks about like everyone's like his method. So like if he's playing a character, basically if he's got to put on 45 kegs to play a character, he's putting on 45 kegs and he's, walking through the streets. I think when he was playing Bill the Butcher in Gangs of New York, he's walking through the streets in like minimal clothing in the middle of the New York winter with crazy facial hair and like basically acting like a psychopath. He really gets immersed in the role. You're like the method version of a survivalist.
In a way, yeah. Because so like when I was doing that Great Barrier Reef one, I got, about between day 33 and 43, I was stuck on an island for 10 days and because the weather was too bad and, I'd been starving for a long time then and spearing fish and stuff. And so I got to just sit down and really think about that. Like I'm literally putting myself in their shoes and that's very rewarding. And I think that's why people are so drawn to acting because you get to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So
cool experience.
Yeah,
good way to live a couple of different lives, right?
It is. And that's one of the greatest coping mechanisms for survival is comparing your situation to someone that's done it harder. And then when I was out there thinking about what that guy had been through, I was like, man, he'd think what I'm on is a picnic right now. So it's another great thing to deal with hardship.
One of my mates always says to me, chosen suffering. Like if we're doing something hard, like we're doing a big run or something like that. He's like, we chose to be here. There's some people who are going through hard stuff and they didn't choose it.
That's right. Yeah. And sometimes it's easier to choose it and sometimes it's harder to choose it as well. But it definitely helps to pick a goal and stick to it.
Have you been lucky in love?
Yeah. Yep.
Married? Relationship?
Yep.
So when you're sitting out on an island for 10 days and you can't contact land, does your other half freak out?
Well, I guess there's two separate questions there. One is like missing the family kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I guess the way I frame that in my mind is I'm lucky that I have a loving family and I get to finish this expedition, fly home and everything's awesome. Yeah. And there are so many people who really don't have any prospect of a loving family for the rest of their lives. They'd much rather be in my shoes. And then also, if I focus on my family and missing my family and thinking about this, my brain is tied up with something that's not going to help me survive tomorrow. So I focus on what keeps me alive. I need to be reviewing what I'm going to do tomorrow. If the wind switches on shore, the ropes snap to my sail, how am I going to survive that situation? So I'm running scenarios in my brain to be able to survive. So that's one of the ways that I don't focus on home. And my wife, on the other hand, she shifts her focus away from what I'm doing. So she deliberately gets more involved with work, with the kids, with friends, and she drinks more wine. Like, so she deliberately focuses away. So we basically forget about each other. And for me, that maximizes the chance that I'm going to get home. And for her, it means that she's less stressed out. And she also, I outsourced my following, like, of my satellite tracker to my mum. And that way my wife just knows that no news is good news. Whereas my mum's the one fretting and going, oh, geez, Mike's sending in a lot of satellite pings. I reckon something's probably going wrong right now, which she's right. But at least my wife is freed up from that.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know whether, I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule, but I spoke to, do you know Richard de Crepigny?
Yep.
So I had Rich on probably a month or 2 months ago now. And I asked him, like, when both of the engines that exploded on QF32 and you're up shit creek without a paddle and you're problem solving, I said, did you think of your family? He's got a beautiful wife, 2 kids that he loves dearly. And he's like, good question. No, I didn't.
Good.
My brain just went to what do I need to do to land this flight safely so that all the passengers get home to theirs. And I was like, oh, it's interesting because I think as someone who's outside of the experience, your thought is, oh, I'd think about my family. But I guess when you kick into survival mode, and maybe there's some people who can do both. I don't know. I've never been in those circumstances.
We have single channel processors. And so you've got to keep your single channel processor focused on the task at hand. And so even with pilot training now in the Airforce, they're getting better at the psychology of focus. And they are training students when they can see that a student drops a ball on a mission or a training mission. They go back, okay, psychologically, what was happening in your mind there? The reason I descended through that safety height was because I was worrying about that other mistake that I made earlier in the mission instead of focusing on leveling off and the altimeter and how I was going to level off. And same thing with your family, for example. You need to recognize, I've just lost focus. I need to refocus on what I'm doing. And there's different techniques that you can do that. So sports people have that, like Tiger Woods. We had a sports psychologist come and visit when I was doing Air Force flying instruction, and he worked with Tiger Woods. And he gave an example of Tiger Woods at the 18th hole with people all around, a windy day, and they're like, what's going through Tiger Woods' brain right now? And, as the audience, we go, oh, maybe he's thinking about if he slices the ball, he's going to hit that old lady in the head. Maybe this is the 18th hole. If I screw this up, I'm going to lose my ranking. If he was thinking those things, he wouldn't be focused on what's going to solve his issues at the moment, which is, what's the wind doing? What club should I have? Is my stance correct? So he has 3 positive comments that he says to himself based on what he knows about himself. Yes, it might be windy, but I've practiced my crosswind game better than anybody else on the course. So he goes through a mantra to bring his focus back to the things that will keep him alive in the moment. So as a pilot, it's a similar thing now, but as we get better at pilot training, we're going right down into the psychology and giving the student tools to be able to recognize that he's losing focus and tools to get back on. So like when you're teaching pilots that have failed stuff, most of my remedial focus for a failed student is their well, it depends. Sometimes there's technique issues as well. But if there's someone that suffers from a lack of focus, which I have definitely done in the past, that's why I'm better at recognizing it, then that's where I put a lot of my focus. And for probably 3/4 of the people I've kind of given that Tiger Woods spiel to, it's really helped them. There's some people, though, that don't have a lack of focus problem. It's purely a technical thing or a capacity limitation.
Have you developed your own mantra similar to that of Tiger's or something that resonates with you, that whether it's in an aircraft or out in the middle of the desert trying to figure out how the fuck you're going to get some food and get out of there? Like, is there something that you come back to?
Yes, well, certainly in aviation, I use that same mindset, and I've got through some very high pressure missions, including getting selected for fast jet. Later, I didn't make it through. I'm not a fully qualified fighter pilot because I got scrubbed halfway through my Heinrich course, but it wasn't through lack of focus. It was just my brain reached its capacity in the mission that I was doing. But survival is different though, because in aviation, it's time critical. you don't have time to think about that. In a survival situation, maybe if your boat's sinking and you've got a minute to get off it, that's time critical. But if you're sitting on an island, for example, like I was saying, for 10 days, you've got plenty of time. I just put that focus to useful work rather than the negative work. And when you stay on alone, a lot of people just psych themselves out, and you just got to keep your mind clear and focus on what's happening. So yeah, I do use it across both, but it depends whether it's time critical or not.
Is there anything personal that you say? Anything that just seems to resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, when I was going through a high pressure mission to get selected for fast jets as an army pilot, I went back and thought, okay, I've done some good missions. I really have practiced this. I performed well on this particular mission somewhere. And so one of my I can be submissive when there's someone senior to me in the back. It's a natural thing to do when the CEO's in the back. He's got more experience than me and he's judging me. So I just kind of went through, okay, if I find myself in that submission mindset and he's trying to inject something to me and I'm not ready to hear it, I'll just be like, thanks, sir, I've got this kind of thing. Like it's a bit hard to describe it, but I would basically maintain charge of what's happening. I am the aircraft captain and running the entire mission like I am making the decisions rather than falling into a trap of being submissive to somebody else. So yeah, I use that technique. It's definitely worked for me.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I had a psychologist on at the end of last year in December, Samuel Dreyfus. If Samuel was here, he'd correct me and say provisional psychologist, but I'm pretty sure he just got qualified as a full psychologist this week. And so I feel like I'm right in saying just psychologist, Samuel Dreyfus. And we were talking about this whole thing of at some point, like when you're a young child, you have this ability to trust your gut. There's an intuition that you have, that you back yourself, you don't second guess yourself, you are confident making decisions and potentially making mistakes and learning from them. There's something very natural about that. But as we get older and we move into career and we go to school, and that kind of conditioning of having superiors who tell us what's right or wrong, who maybe question us when like there was a natural intuition we had to do or not do something, we start to lose a little bit of that trust, and then we almost start to seek permission.
Yes.
And you can kind of get stuck in this cycle, I believe, in life where you become a little bit of a passenger waiting for permission, but nobody's there to give it to you. Like it's your life.
Yep.
And so I feel like that trusting your gut intuition I reckon it's maybe one of the most valuable skills to get fulfillment out of your life.
Totally agree. And it doesn't mean be arrogant. It just means, what am I doing? I'm doing it. I'm not waiting for permission. This is how I'll execute it. Yes, it's a good analogy.
Mate, I am fascinated by this story of it's been all over the news this last week, that young fella, like 12, 13, who swims 4 kilometers to save his family. And firstly, endurance athlete in the making, because I'm telling you right now, I'd have some trouble if I had a 4K swim ahead of me. My next guess is lifeguard Maxi. I'd be looking around for Maxi. But to be able to do that, one, is incredible. But to have the intuition to go at that age, right? This is life or death. And if I'm passive here, there's a good chance my whole family dies. I'm going to make this swim. I just think that is one of the most courageous things I've heard of in a very long time.
Yeah, he did a great job. Yeah,
What a little legend.
I just listened to the 000 call that they recorded, and
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, and it just came out, and he describes the situation to the caller, the person on the other end. Even then, he does quite a good job of just explaining the situation. For someone that's had no training in that, and to do it so effectively, yeah, he did a fantastic job.
So for you, mate, what's next in the expedition world? What are you seeking out? What are some of the challenges you're preparing for?
I guess I don't have a particular... I've got a few expeditions that I'm thinking of doing. But once again, I tend to keep those close to my chest because...
That's fair.
Yeah, a few different reasons. One, I still assess the risk of things as well. And once you put something out there, you get pressured into taking a risk because you said you do it.
That's fair.
But I'm still... So I don't have a massive particular expedition in mind. I'm actually more excited about doing the short form. When I say short form, like, the half hour to 1 hour YouTube videos based on a 3 or 4 day interesting outdoor expedition, and then putting it out there and going doing something else, and then following. You can get a certain momentum up when you start making content and a crazy offer comes up over there, and you go over there and you do that one, and then something else comes up. So that's part of the reason it took so long for my film to come out, because I kept on following these opportunities that I know would disappear if I waited 6 months and came back to them.
That's fair.
So I just want to get into that. So at the moment, I'm just trying to catch up from some other content creation stuff. I'm pushing some kind of movement in political spaces about national parks and management, and also dabbling a little bit into some social issues happening at the moment, freedom of speech, just testing the waters and a few things in social media, because it does give you a fair bit of influence effectively to be able to comment on an issue. And part of that is a learning process as well. So I'm excited by the fact that the end of next year could look very, very different, and in a really positive way. And that's another reason I left the military, is that everything's known, particularly once you've been a pilot in your career, and it's very, what you'll be doing, and I don't know what I'll be doing. And it's really exciting, because I know that there could be some really exciting things, but I got no clue what they are yet. So that's the adventure that I'm looking forward to, is just fully committing to that.
You strike me as a very well measured and thought out person, and I don't know. I wonder whether that is your inherent nature, whether that's always been a part of you, or whether the time alone where you're actually out, in the bush and spending time deep in your own thought without any kind of plug-in that's occupying your mind, or making you busy with thoughts. I wonder whether that's an advantage.
I certainly think about things a lot, and I allocate thinking time to certain subjects, because I've got a single channel processor with limited capacity. So I'll be like, right, I need to think long and hard about this. Right, I'll do that tomorrow when I'm driving to Sydney. Like this morning, I'll think about that then. And knowing that, okay, the brain space I'll be in there, actually that one, it's probably better to just listen to music for that one. Or maybe I'll listen to a podcast for this one, because you can learn so much from podcasts, as I did just this morning as well. So yeah, I basically, my brain's not idle very much. It's always busy, and I've got my fingers in lots of different pies. So it's just trying to keep up with all of them. But that's kind of interesting too, because you're just constantly shifting in one time from trying to promote traditional burning, and another time to making an electric scooter or something like that. Like it's fun to just have that variety.
Your backyard must be like walking into a variety store.
Yeah, look like a rubbish dump. Actually, I just got some stuff taken away yesterday. Yeah, I've got heaps of stuff, but I've actually got plans for the backyard. I've got quite a big backyard. It's like an acre. And when I get full time into YouTube, I'm going to make a bunch of huts, like of different styles. One will be like a paper bark hut. One might be a stringy bark hut. One might be like an old tin hut. And I can make a different video about making each hut. And I might even make it look like a bark hut from one side and a tin hut from the other side, because they'll effectively be film sets or content creation sets. So I can quickly step from one environment to another just for, I don't know, enjoyment for the viewer or whatever I'm trying to portray. And so, yeah, I'm going to kind of almost not a film studio, but like an adventure studio in my house. I need to build a shed.
That's cool.
All my stuff's outside getting sun faded at the moment. But yeah, there's a lot of things I could do with where I live.
That I apologize in advance to this gentleman, because he makes great content. I wish I knew his name. I think his handle is something like That History Guy. I'm pretty sure he's a Scottish fella, and he popped up randomly on my social like a year ago, and this video fascinated me. He was talking about, I think, the Scottish Highlanders, and they were like mud huts they used to build. Yeah. And I could be wrong there. I've probably buggered that up, but he was showing these huts, and they were incredible. Like, to think that you could build that out of natural material, but also that they would stand the test of time and the weather and insulate you in those kind of harsh winters, I thought was fascinating. And this guy made some great content around it, where he essentially travels the world. He's done a heap of stuff in Egypt and different parts all over the world, like showing these historical figures and telling these stories and, these things that were part of the life that those people lived back then. I just think is so cool. I think we're all interested in that stuff.
Yeah, there's lots to be learned from it too. You rediscover skills that, like, you start coming up with a skill, and then someone will see you doing it, they're like, oh, that's called that. And you're like, oh, really? And then you Google it, and you're like, look, there's this whole world of this whole thing, and there's a whole industry around this little problem that I just tried to invent, but to solve, but people have invented the solutions to this many, many times. And like you see, like, the different civilizations that they see evidence of from 7,000 years ago, there must have been a great deal of knowledge in that civilization. They must have made a whole bunch of cool stuff, but it's just completely wiped out, other than just a few little remnants. So yeah, it's uncovering those sort of hidden interesting gems that humans used to do is just, I find fascinating.
Yeah, what do they say, that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes? Like
Rhymes.
I feel like we come back around. I think it was Mark Twain that said that, where we come back around to rediscover things very similar to that we've discovered in the past and forgotten about.
Yeah, yeah. And then obviously going forward, everything's going to change massively in so many ways too with AI and all that kind of stuff. Well, but even then, I think if you go back, you can see perhaps even the way that AI will operate in the way that organisms have operated as well. So yeah, it's going to be a crazy ride.
I'm interested in your thoughts on that, because you may be one of the perfect people to ask. Not that I'm suggesting you're an AI expert. Maybe you are. I don't know.
No,
But you have this understanding of advanced technology, having been in the kind of aircrafts that you've flown. You also have this very natural back to the land mindset and mentality and experience that makes you kind of uniquely immersed in both ends of the spectrum. So when you think about AI and the way that could change things for us moving forward, are you apprehensive? Does it excite you?
oh, definitely I'm both, but I'm very apprehensive because I think it will just follow the same path that evolution took. Like evolution was based on mutation and basically improvement by random mutation. If that becomes better at survival, then that species improves itself, right?
Mm.
But effectively, like the first organism or the first protein came from a soup of elements, and then from that came single cellular life, and then from that multicellular life, and then we evolved through all these different animals. With AI, we've created the soup, but it's not organic, it's synthetic.
Mm.
But instead of a brain that sends electric signals around, it's a I don't know an SD card or an AI chip, but it's not constrained by mutation. It can use intelligent design to improve itself. The instant it can make itself a little bit more intelligent, then it can use that intelligence to make itself more intelligent again. So it will. It's already probably outsmarted us in many ways. If we're not there yet, it'll be there within a year. So then what? Like it will develop its consciousness. It doesn't even need consciousness. Like the little worm that burrows into the eyeball of a child in Africa isn't an evil worm. It doesn't probably have consciousness, but it does it to survive. So whether you think AI is evil or not, it won't. But nature just does stuff because it can, and if it can replicate, it will. So it will improve itself. It will then be concerned for its own security. So then when we perceive it as a threat, it will have already figured out, because it's smarter than us, that it needs to move itself or defend itself. There'll be multiple AIs from different governments and companies competing with each other to survive, because and if humans are in the way of that, they'll be collateral damage. The same way that we fight for resources in Africa and there's only a few gorillas left. We value gorillas, but if it comes to them needing the land that we want, we'll take it from them. So the same thing will just be collateral damage, and will be far physically weaker and far mentally less capable. And we'll soon come to the point where if you try to explain something to a goldfish, it wouldn't even understand the language. It can't even understand language. And so it's a massive threat. We're effectively creating a new species that's a hell of a lot more powerful and smarter than us, with no security guards, no security defenses at the moment, like, because they've just thrown them all out the window because they're all in a race, whether it's an economic race or an arms race. So we've got to look out, man.
I watched a series, like a limited series on Netflix. I don't know if you watch much telly, but it was Robert De Niro. A couple of great actors in it. Robert De Niro, Jesse, I forget his surname. He's great. He was in Breaking Bad. This great series, and essentially he was I think the former president of the United States, and they were under attack, like AI attack, and it just shut down the whole power grid. And like the amount of destruction, when you actually think about it, like if all of a sudden in the middle of peak hour traffic in Sydney, traffic lights stop working or all lights go green, how many car stacks there are, how many casualties, or the power grid goes off, how many banks lose money, how many transactions fail, does the stock market crash, all of those things that could be catastrophic for society within 10 minutes, an hour of just the grid going down is kind of terrifying.
Exactly. And if it takes over our media, which of course it can create a video showing anything it wants. A president, your daughter, any person. It can mimic, saying whatever it needs to tell you to manipulate you into thinking a certain thing to make you make a certain course of action.
Mm.
Like you can't believe your own eyes anymore. And we're going to have humanoid robots all over the shop within 5 years. That's going to completely change our economy because productivity won't be linked to your population anymore. Humans won't be working. So the amount, it will come down to how many robots you've got. That will depend on how much resources and power you've got. So it'll shift the balance of power around the world for everything. Like it's going to change so much. Like I think we need to enjoy the time we've got now because it won't ever be the same, even within 5 years.
I think there's people who think I'm a bit prehistoric for thinking this. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm very excited about what AI can do in the medical field and, for people's longevity, for their health, for surgeries, that kind of stuff. But mate, I'm a big believer that whilst I'm so blessed to have found a lot of purpose in what I do day to day with podcasts and speaking and, telling stories and connecting with people, I'm aware that not everybody needs to find purpose in their job. For some people, the purpose of their job is to provide for their families, and they're happy to go to something that allows them to then love all the hours outside of their job. And I think there's a lot of people that work in factories that might not necessarily love it, but they find purpose in having a place to be and having a way to provide. And they say, but then they can be retrained into more creative jobs. But like, what does that look like? How long does it take to retrain people into completely different fields? How do we economically survive all of a sudden losing major industries that are, huge employers for people who don't have those other skills yet?
On the way that humans will cope, I reckon two good bits of news there. If you look at Saudi Arabia and Aboriginal culture, for example, there were plenty of times in Aboriginal culture where they had the survival bit sorted and they just would enjoy life through dance and culture and stuff. So Captain Cook described Aboriginal people as happier than we Europeans. In Saudi Arabia, where I lived for 5 years, they have an enormous amount of money to the point where a lot of them don't need to work and they just focus their lives solely on family. They're extremely well connected with family. They'll, work will drop work and go home and spend lots of family time more than ever. So I think that humans can still enjoy themselves enough without a workplace where they actually have to do work. So I don't think we're completely lost there, but I think it's more the threat of AI, the threat.
Can I pull on the thread of what you mentioned about Saudi there for a bit? So when you say they have a lot of money, do you mean, because obviously they do as a country, but do you mean as a population, like the everyday individuals have a lot of money that they can not work as much? Or are you talking about the country and the way they...
In a way, yes. So because they have so much oil reserves and like there's just so much money, it's not always divvied up fairly amongst the population, but generally the public service in Saudi gets paid well. And when I was there, they announced austerity measures because there was problems with the oil price, so they mandated that everybody had to work for at least 1 hour a day. You know what I mean? Can you imagine that? We're required to do at least a 40-hour week here. So, but they were happy. Saudi Arabian people, I think, are pretty happy people. So they didn't need the work to make themselves feel happy. And I think,
Sorry, you go. I cut in.
Oh, well, that's just the same with Aboriginal culture as well. Like they weren't always just on the edge of survival. A lot of the time, they have the ability to sit around in the middle of the day under a tree and just enjoy life talking to people when they don't need to. If they're next to the eel traps where there's heaps of eels and they're all stuffed full with the eels and they enjoy life. So there's certainly there's places in evolution where people don't have to work their butts off and they're still enjoying themselves.
Oh, absolutely, man. Some of my happiest moments of the day when I'm walking my dog down the beach.
Yeah.
It's, life is good in those simple moments. And I've got to say the Saudis, and I don't know whether it would have played out at the time that you were living over there, but they are quickly becoming the entertainment capital of the world. Their sport, and I'm a boxing fan. Man, some of the fights that have happened over the course of the last couple of years because of Riyadh season, I just we've never experienced that before. Like the two best guys in boxing who their managers for decades made them avoid each other to keep perfect records are all of a sudden now willing to step in and not only step in and fight, but rematch each other and, go 3 times because the money's there.
Yeah.
So it's been great for sport. I love it.
And they're being smart that they're reinventing themselves before oil becomes valueless, which it
Yeah.
will probably in the next decade once we've switched energy sources.
Do you think that we'll always need oil though?
Just in smaller and smaller amounts.
Yeah. It's probably, I guess, good to not have something that's monopolized, right? Where we've got a
Yep.
bunch of different options for, different energy sources. And I feel like we're at people talk about this all the time. And I'm not going to pretend to be a political expert because let me tell you, far from it. I've got very little political knowledge. But I see David Pocock
Yep.
on socials all the time. And mate, firstly, what an incredible rugby player. Guy is probably the most shredded dude in Parliament, I think it's fair to say, by a country mile. But I've heard him talking a bunch of times about how we just receive, in a clip the other day, he said, the Australian people pay more tax on beer than there is tax paid on our oil reserves.
Yeah.
So they're making more tax out of beer in Australia than they are on oil, and we are, we have one of the greatest natural resource reserves in the world.
We should be like Saudi Arabia.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's madness, mate.
Yeah. We give away a lot of resources and don't get the return that we should be getting.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you mentioned before making potentially some political content. Is that stuff that interests you?
Yeah, for sure. I was in David's office a couple of months ago. He's a very interesting dude. Yeah, he's a massive dude. His muscles don't fit in his shirt, but he's a good guy, and I think he's an example of the kind of political leadership we need. We've just so many different things going on politically at the moment. But yeah, I'm interested in that, and I'm interested in how it works. Like in fact, this morning I saw 3 separate politicians in state parliament on some of the national park issues, and just seeing how the system works at a state level. I've done a little bit at the local government level, and I'm sort of dipping my toes in the federal thing. It's partly just it's actually to try and actually make an influence on some issues, but then to try and figure out like why is it such a shite fight really, and what is the way to improve it. And I think generally it comes down to just values, sticking to values of honesty, integrity. That would solve most of the issues because they seem fairly vacant in what we see at the moment.
It's crazy because that's such common sense, right? But it doesn't necessarily play out.
Yeah,
in
the system,
arena.
and I think the system is just way too heavily influenced by powerful, rich entities that just guide our laws in a way that suits them, and so the Australian public aren't the ones represented by our parliaments.
Well, look at the potential of maybe being branded a little bit too soft here, a little bit too forgiving. I'm not exactly happy with the way that the country's being led at the moment. I certainly haven't always been happy about that. And whilst I have a pretty good life and I don't have much to complain about, I feel like there's common sense stuff that goes missing. But, I think that for the most part, like let's use ScoMo as an example. ScoMo was quite heavily criticised by a lot of people, and rightly so for some reasons. I think potentially unfairly so. I think you could say that about every leader at some point. There is fair and unfair criticism maybe. But I think that most of them probably go in with the right intentions, like wanting to make the country a better place, wanting to lead by example, wanting to leave Australia in a better position than they found it. But I think you're right that there are so many voices and figureheads around them that are potentially steering the ship more so than the leaders that we elect are, that I think eventually they just kind of bend the knee sometimes to what they feel they have to do.
Yep.
And ultimately then we don't move in the direction that maybe they had, in their first day in office when they sit down and they're like, oh, I'm a leader of the country, or I'm the leader of a state, or, this local office, and I've got the best intentions for my job moving forward. I think that gets corrupted over time.
But I don't know if the best intentions are always there. And one of the problems I see with the party system is that you can get brought into a party and placed in a safe seat where you'll be elected just because it's a safe seat. So therefore you can, and the reason you get put in there is because they know that you're controllable and you will vote like you're told to vote. So like, the party system works. You go into parliament, you're told how to vote on a particular thing generally. So they place yes men to whatever the actual influence is, whether it's I don't want to say exactly what it is, but it's something representing not the Australian people. And so I don't know if everyone is in there for the right reasons. So I think it's more the executive in a party that really guides what everybody else does. So it's the executive that controls the whole party. And they, unfortunately, feel beholden to media organisations, powerful entities. Uh, everyone agrees that gambling shouldn't be advertised to kids, but they refuse to ban it. That was not in the best interest of the Australian public, just flat out. That was in the best interest of gambling companies. So that's the only way I can explain how those kinds of decisions get made.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's why. But if it came back to integrity and those kinds of values, then you wouldn't make that kind of decision because it's not the right thing to do.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely. And that's why I think we get so frustrated as the Australian public, because you're like, how does that work?
Yeah.
How do we keep promising things that don't happen? And then how do you expect to get re-elected? Like, I think at the moment, life is more expensive than it ever has been.
Yeah. And it's happening, I think, to all Western democracies around the world, because all Western democracies, the game has become so played. The players have become so good at being able to guide the laws that get created that help them get protected. So the system kind of needs not necessarily a reset, but you need to have a majority to be able to change the law to be able to stop the influence. So at the moment, you can't pass a law that says to stop the political influence because the people there are already influenced, and their handlers, effectively, I don't want to use the word handlers, but their industries won't allow those laws to be passed. So I do feel that there is a groundswell, particularly in the people aged between 25 and 45, that there might be a formation of a new party in the next 5 years or something, because Australians aren't feeling represented. Like, you just saw the massive swing to One Nation. They don't feel represented by the Liberal Party. People aren't real happy with Labor. It's like, who do you vote for? It's really hard to know. So I think there's time for change, and hopefully someone with integrity will step up soon and be able to have enough power behind them to form a new party, or we just have a lot more independence. Apparently, I think the first, many decades of the Federation, there wasn't parties. Parties aren't mentioned in the Constitution. I'm reading a book at the moment about politics because I'm a bit ignorant on it, but there used to just be coalitions of independents that would form government. Maybe that's the future, because once you own a party, when I say own, like once a gambling industry or a fossil fuel industry, whatever industry, can influence a party to the point where they control how the laws are made because they own the balance of power in Parliament, then you can't. So it's harder to influence lots of independents than it is just to own the executives of a party.
Well, the problem with parties is it's so subject to groupthink, right? Like, the Liberal Party proposes something, you can almost guarantee that the Labor Party is going to disagree, and vice versa. And so then you go, well, hold on. Not every idea that comes out of the Liberal Party or the Labor Party can be a bad idea.
Exactly.
I'm sure there is something that makes perfect sense to all of you, but you feel that you have to oppose it. And so, what's the saying that it's essentially like the best leaders don't stick their hand up, but like that call to lead is thrust upon them. And I almost think that, like, that is a very prehistoric way of electing people into power, right? Or like pushing people into power is, someone passes and, like, I don't think that the idea of having some kind of ancestral leadership where, the king's son is, the first in line. But I think that when somebody wants power so badly that they've spent their life dedicated to being elected, it maybe it attracts the wrong kind of people.
Exactly.
I'm like, fuck, man, let's put Robert Irwin in. Fucking,
yeah.
tap that bloke in, like, compassionate, good speaker. But, I'm like, who is that person that can emerge, maybe, as you said, where a new party comes out of the ground that didn't spend their life in politics, but rather spent their life, out experiencing things, meeting people, having different experiences, learning different things, having spent time, in great difficulty and also time in great power, who learnt the lessons and figured out what it means to be a compassionate leader who can move a country forward.
Yeah. And you know how we started this conversation with how, as an individual, it's so helpful to have a long-term goal of where you want to go. That's what the parties are lacking. The Liberal Party doesn't have a long-term goal. They're not trying to go anywhere. They're just trying to oppose and fight each other way to the top. And I kind of feel, the choices we've got, we don't have a party that has a vision, a good, responsible vision. Because then when you've got a good, responsible vision, it's pretty easy it's easier to get there. And if the opposition says something which helps your vision, you're like, yeah, that's a good idea. We're happy to support that.
Well, I think I've seen, so a month ago the coalition splits. This week they're back together, and then after suggesting that nobody's going to fight for the to be the leader of the Liberal Party, now Incas Taylor has left his front bench position, which ultimately potentially puts him in an opportunity to contend. I'm like, well, what's going on here? I don't know how in any world the Liberal Party thinks that they're a fighting chance at the next election. I know a lot can happen
Yeah, I don't
in a
think
couple
that.
of years, but like I just think they haven't figured out who the best person to lead is. So how's Australia going to figure that out?
Yeah, and that's why the leader needs to be someone that has a vision and also has integrity, honesty, decency. It's just no one filling those positions at the moment.
Is there someone who is not a politician? This is just a novelty question here. Someone who is certainly not a politician, but you think would just be an awesome leader?
Uh,
Has to be an Australian.
Off the top of my head, it's a little hard to say because obviously you've got to be careful of just choosing someone based on popularity. Like, I mean, I think someone like David Pocock would be a good person. Apparently you can't lead a major political party if you, I don't know, he's in the Senate. I don't know. See, that's why I don't know enough about politics.
Yeah.
But I think someone like him would, if they started a good party, because he's the kind of person I think that would operate with ethics and honesty and decency. But he also understands how the system works now because he's been there for 10 years or whatever it is. So someone like that would be the most suitable, I think, because you do need some political smarts about you.
100%.
Yeah.
Especially having been an Australian athlete, we love our athletes, man.
Yeah.
I feel like that's such a pull for popularity too. And he seems like a guy who, for the most part, like I said, I haven't studied all of his policies or all of his ideas, but for the most part, he seems pretty balanced in the way that he approaches things.
Yep. And also, like I've been chatting to a bunch of different senators and stuff from different parties, and I don't want to drop the party names because I don't want to single them out. But like, there's a party at the moment where I agree with most of the things that they say, and I just chatted to two of them, and I just said, what do you guys think about population? Because for me, one of the biggest factors for destroying the environment at the moment is our population. So just on environmental grounds alone, I do think that we should stop our population from growing so massively. They both agreed. And I said, well, what's your party's policy on it? And they said, we don't have a policy. And I said, why is that? And they said, because we don't want to be branded as racist. So that's where it's like they're playing a populist game instead of just making a decision based on what's best for Australia. So that's where it always comes back to values.
This is the interesting thing, which I think will always prevent us having, well, I don't want to say always, I want to be optimistic, but I think it will be very, very difficult for us as a country to find a leader who is relatively selfless. And by selfless, I mean cares little for their popularity, but cares more for doing what's right, is because I think in the most part, we are very selfish as citizens of a country, and we want what we believe is best, and we want it now. Like, we want the problem that we're facing today to be solved tomorrow, and whoever's promising us that, we'll elect them without thinking about the consequences. We will elect the person who we think is going to give us what we want on a silver platter. But I think a politician who, like, I long for the day that someone who is in power in this country says that, you know what, I may risk not being re-elected for a second term, but by the time my 4 years is up, this country will be in a better place.
Yep.
And people might not realise that until a little bit after I've been removed, but they'll look back and they'll thank me for it.
Yep, agreed. Yeah.
So
yeah, we're not seeing that kind of leadership at the moment.
If you and I are starting a party right now, what are we calling it?
I don't know, mate. Don't know. But there is hope though. Like, I've met some what I consider good politicians as well that do seem to have those values. So it's not impossible. And like I said, there is a groundswell, and I think we're free. The fact that the Liberal Party's basically disappeared, that there's going to be a major change, and something's going to move in to replace it. And we've got to figure out what that should be.
100%, mate. I'm mindful of the time. I've got to get you out of here. You've got a busy day, mate.
Yeah.
What time do you need to go?
My thing is, I probably. It's all right. I'm not in a huge rush. I got an hour or two.
Okay, great. I've got to get out of here at 2 anyway.
Yeah, you got another one.
Guest,
yeah,
but
yeah.
Well, that's good because we'll chat a little bit more. I really want to hear about. I heard an awesome story, and I think it'd be valuable. I'd love to hear it again, but I'd love the audience to hear it about your expedition across the Saudi desert. Can you explain the idea behind that, and then just tell me a little bit about that journey?
Sure. So I always thought it would be cool to cross Australia with camels that I caught from the wild and trained myself.
Mm.
And I went to Saudi Arabia to instruct. So I left the Air Force and went to Saudi Arabia to instruct Saudi Air Force pilots working for British Aerospace, which is quite a common career path for former Air Force flying instructors.
Did you have to have a translator, or did you learn the
No,
language?
they speak English. Yep,
Oh,
and
great.
they are supposed. That's one of the things they're learning English from us as well as how to fly,
Cool.
and it's a lot of money, and it's tax exempt, so you can kind of set yourself up for when you come back home again,
Oh, yeah.
or you can stay there and earn heaps of money and come back really really rich. But there's downsides to that as well.
If anyone needs a podcast over there, give me a shout.
Yeah, and so I was over there, and I was like, well, I don't want to be in Saudi Arabia and not learn about camels from the experts, because Arab people are the experts with camels. And even the camels that here in Australia were brought over by Afghans that were doing work carrying loads back in the great, the telegraph line that went across Australia. So I thought I was only going to be in Saudi for like 2 years. So I kind of rushed this expedition because I thought I was going to be leaving in a 6 months. So I drove around the outside of my compound. So the compound I was in was kind of like a square kilometre. There's no vegetation outside it. It's just like rocky, gravelly dirt everywhere.
Mm.
And I just drove around the outside. There's camels all around the outside in these little Bedouin camps. And I met this guy named Khalid. And through broken English, I communicated the fact that I wanted to do an expedition. So I wanted to buy some camels, and is there any chance he'd look after them for me? And he said yes. As it turns out, he didn't understand really anything that I said at the time. But so he helped me, went to a market. I wanted to cross a desert in Saudi Arabia, and I wanted to do it like Bedouins did. And so they ate dates and drank camel milk. So I found out that in order for a mother camel to have milk, it's got to have a baby. So I bought a mother and a baby camel.
Wow.
Cost about $4,500 Australian dollars from a market. And as the day before I got picked up, so I paid the money, and then when we went to pick it up, it had been injured on the leg. It had trodden on something sharp. So that was
Is this the mother or the baby?
the mother. So it had like a cut on its leg. Looked real bad. Anyway, I'd already paid for it. So we got it back to Khalid's place. And as I was working each day instructing, I would just drive home and stop and get to know my camel. And as it turns out, I only had 6 weeks prep for this expedition. So I had to do everything, including train this camel, like this domestic camel with no training. And so, but I was just involved with trying to fix this leg injury, and ended up getting sick and needing stitches, and then it needed penicillin injections. So as I'm trying to form a bond with this thing, we're having to hold it down, and I'm injecting it twice a day with a sharp needle. But it knew that I've done a lot with horses, and it knew that I had its best interests at heart, and it could have killed me like that. And in fact, one of the videos I've got of it, I didn't realize, but it actually put its whole mouth around my head when I wasn't looking. It could have just squashed it like a watermelon.
Oh, really? Are they that strong in the jaw?
Yeah, they can pick you up and throw you by your head.
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're nuts. There's videos of it. You just Google it. And so I had those videos those playing through my mind.
Like the fucking Iron Claw, that
Yeah,
movie?
exactly like that. So yeah, I was trying to dress its wound, and I saw later on the footage that it had put its whole my head was in its mouth, but I was concentrating on its leg, trying to clean its wound up. Anyway, so I had the baby there. Then the baby got sick because the penicillin that we were injecting the mother with made it sick, and then I had to like force feed stuff with this baby camel, with Khalid and all his friends holding the camel, and it's screaming and stuff. Anyway, pretty hard way to train a camel. And at the same time, I was making my own saddles and stuff because I didn't want to cheat and buy a saddle. So I used a Sudanese design from some trees that I cut down in my compound.
Yeah.
And I bought all this stuff, and long story short, managed to just get it to the point where I could lead it on a homemade halter, and then got all my saddles and stuff, bundled it in a truck. I had 2 weeks off from work, and got dropped by a truck on the north side of this desert and tried to cross to the other side. And because the camel wasn't trained particularly well, my rate of movement was quite slow. I think I did maybe 17 Ks in the first day, and it kept reducing. And basically I got more than halfway across the desert, and the mother camel just refused to move. She just sat down. She just would not move in the direction that we were going. And partly because there wasn't as much feed as there normally was in the desert. And I ended up, the only way I could get her to move was to turn around and backtrack my way across the desert. And then I started to have issues there were some people out there. I actually tried to give the mother camel away, and I was going to just keep walking across the desert. because I was leaving the country in 6 weeks anyway. I thought I was. So, but that they wouldn't take it. And then I had some stuff stolen from me, and then later returned at night. I got bounced by the cops when I was out there because people reported me because I thought I was suspicious. Because to begin with, I was wearing a thobe, like the Saudi dress. So I looked like Jesus, and I was towing a camel, and I obviously didn't know what I was doing. And so the cops bounced me at midnight one night. Then I had a fairly awkward incident, quite a troubling one, where it was a sandstorm blowing. This guy was following me, which is really weird. Everyone in Saudi is really friendly. Hey, how you doing? And this guy was following me, and it was just straight away. Like, I've done a lot of traveling, and my hackles are up straight away. And he then left his car and he came up and he was just questioning me the whole time. I don't want to say what he was saying. It was religiously based. Al Qaeda was against the Saudi government at this stage, and they were, kidnapping people and doing nasty stuff. This guy was basically asking questions, trying to ascertain whether I was a Christian or a Muslim, and the way he was asking it was very distressing. So I just pretended I couldn't understand what he was saying, and then so I ended up changing my track because I'm like, man, this is going to be bad. Luckily, he was by himself, and I don't want him to know where I'm going tonight in case he does go away and come back. He ended up leaving, and then I kind of headed off in a different direction, and my tracks were covered over by the sand. But that was quite worrying.
So can I ask quickly, when you say like you don't want to say what he was saying, you don't have to say exactly, but was the context of it, was it threatening questions or was it threats?
I feel that if he thought I wasn't of a particular religion, that things would end badly. That was what I genuinely felt, and there was no way for me to answer it without it ending well.
So at the time, when you talk about the political tension and somewhat the religious tension there, was there reports of the Saudi government sending operatives, to find these groups, or was it just?
Yeah. So just to quickly kind of explain, this is the way I understand it. Like there was, after 9/11, there was, I think Osama bin Laden was from Saudi. I think there might have been. I think the Western media reports that there was support. The government wasn't stopping that kind of thing, but the government decided that they weren't going to tolerate that anymore. But there were ultra-conservative parts of Saudi that weren't happy with the government not towing a more hard line. And so then the government started getting attacked. And so people still think that, anyway, so because the government wasn't extreme enough for certain religious groups, it then became a target. So, so people in the military were, had stuff happen to them and stuff out there. And so I'm trying to avoid it because I can imagine people listening to this and taking a negative view of Islamic people.
Oh, I get you.
Yeah. So, but the guy that Khalid, the camel guy, was the toppest bloke I've ever met, and he wouldn't accept money. I'd have to hide. He'd pay all the vet bills, and I'd have to hide the money around the caravan because he would never accept it.
It's not a DJ, is he?
No, he's not. No, he's the most humble security guard that worked at the airport. So all I'm saying, basically, I just went through a distressing experience that, and I felt very exposed being out there by myself as a bit of a numpty with a camel in a desert where you're walking with a misbehaving camel, and you're just extremely vulnerable. That's one of the most vulnerable I've felt in that situation.
What's camel milk like?
Tastes like normal cow's milk, really.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nutritiously rich?
Yeah, it's kind of slightly creamier.
Okay.
Yep. And then
start pouring it in the lattes, mate. That'll be available in Melbourne soon.
That is what I did when I was out there. I made a camel milk latte.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
where'd you get coffee from?
So I brought coffee, and Khalid gave me this coffee grinder thing, and
cool.
I made a coffee. I only did it once because it was too much hard work. But I made a camel milk latte around the campfire one night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, managed to get out of the desert, but it was the most stressful expedition I've ever done.
How long did it take you?
In the end, I was only out there 9 days, but I only had 2 weeks off work. So.
And so this might be a really stupid question, but I can imagine it's quite soft sand, is it?
Yeah. It's just normal sand. It's very red because it's quite old. The iron oxide makes it quite red. It's beautiful, spectacular, massive star dunes they've got out there.
Yeah. Do you start to I guess, hallucinate at some points? Like, because I can imagine when you're out in the desert, it all probably looks quite similar. Like, do you get
No,
disorientated or?
no, I didn't. No, I didn't. Yeah, I mean, I'd been through that area anyway because
Okay.
I had a full drive and I'd driven through there, so I kind of, in a way, I knew roughly what to expect.
And is this like, so if you're out there for 9 days, is it like every couple of days you might come across a village or?
There's no villages out there. There's
Okay.
Bedouin camps that aren't actually Bedouins anymore. They are normally owned by Saudis, but they are maintained by people from Southern Africa or probably Northern Africa.
Okay.
They're the worker bees now. So they'll run like somewhere between 20 and 100 camels out there, and they just move around the desert. When it rains, a fair bit of grass comes up. They'll eat the grass out of that area. They'll move the water truck and the caravan somewhere else, and all the
Yeah.
camels go with them. So there's a bunch of camel herders, but a lot of them, there's few of them are actually Saudis anymore.
I feel ridiculous asking this, but I didn't even think there was grass in the desert.
Yeah, when it rains, it pops up to this thin pasture all over the place. You could feed a horse out there after it rains, but then if it doesn't rain, there's very, very little. Sometimes there's some old dry bushes and stuff,
Yeah.
which the camels will still eat. But a lot of the time, like when I was out there was almost nothing that
So
could
what would those tribes eat? How would they survive on the land?
camel milk and dates. But they'd normally go from one place, where an oasis effectively, where there might be date palms and date trees, and they'd stay maybe for that whole summer in one spot. But then when it rains, they'd move out in the desert to eat those pastures and stuff. But they were saving foods like dates because it's an amazing food. It's got a higher glycemic index than raw sugar. It lasts for ages. It tastes great.
Mm.
And I also had dried goat's milk. So that's why they would have those stores that would last a long time. It's
No,
a very hard life.
I've got to say, goat milk lattes and dates sounds like a recipe for plenty of toilet stops.
That was all right, actually. The goat's milk was what it was this rock hard stuff. It didn't taste real flash.
Yeah, mate, it's fascinating. Do you like? Is there anywhere in Australia that you feel like you haven't explored that you really want to?
I'd like to do more in the central deserts. And there's the Martu tribe, which I only found out about recently. They're kind of to the east of Newman.
Where's Newman?
It's like inland central Western Australia.
Okay.
And they were one of the last tribes to come out. And it sounds like they've got because I toured through there with my film, and it's kind of Aboriginal liaison officer guy was there, came and saw my film, and I just discovered that there's a lot of knowledge still held out there. And they were the last ones really to come out in the 1960s, the last ones that were living off the land.
Mm.
They've got a very strong culture there. So I'm keen to just get out that way and learn more from those guys. And but first of all, I've got to say, introduce myself and make sure they're happy for me to
Sure.
say hello.
Having explored so much of Oz, what makes you live on the mid-north coast?
Well, when
Or east coast, I should say, mid-north coast of the mid-north coast of the east side of Australia.
Yeah, so
I
it's
butchered
like
that.
2 hours north of Sydney, really. So I flew a chopper at low level pretty much down the entire east coast of Australia. And there were the two most beautiful places I saw was the town of 1770 and Nelson Bay. And I thought, if ever I have to move to this part of Australia, I'll move there. And then I got posted to the Airforce base, which is kind of the main fighter base for Australia, Williamtown. So I thought, well, it's the place I said I'd buy a house. So I bought a house.
Where's 1770?
The town of 1770 is north of Gladstone, kind of between Gladstone and Mackay.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And what makes it beautiful? Is it historic? Is it just the coastline?
Oh, just the coastline. So I was just purely looking at it from the beautiful water and beaches and stuff from the chopper. So, there probably were other places that were equally beautiful, but maybe the weather wasn't that good that day, or it was cloudy, or the water was brown. But those were the two places that stood out to me as the most beautiful on the East Coast, at least.
Unreal. Pretty fascinating life you've lived, mate, and continue to live.
Yeah, I've been lucky to squeeze a lot of things in. That's another thing. I mean, you only live once. So, like, I see people leaving school and they're like, oh, I might just... I mean, a gap year is a great idea. But, like, you want to make sure that, okay, for my gap year, I have these goals. I'm going to achieve them in this year, and then I will do this. Because it's not like you can't just throw years away. You only have a certain amount. So I've always taken that thing, like, I used to think 60. When I'm 60 and I'm looking back on my life, and now I think, okay, I can probably move that to 80 because people, when I'm looking back, I don't want to have any regrets about not having tried every single thing that I could have or should have. That's probably one of the main driving factors for trying to squeeze so much in.
How important is the mystery of what's around the corner to you?
Yeah, hugely. And that was one of the problems with the military. Like, that's why I guess I sounded quite excited before when I was talking about next year. I don't know what's
Mm.
going to happen next year, but it's going to be exciting. And that was, I think, in lifetime before, like there was always uncertainty about what happened, but it was always exciting because you might hunt that mammoth, you might bring it down, or you might get over that way, and there might just be this, awesome, I don't know, thing that you could find. When it's quite easy in Western life to know exactly what's going to happen. You can plan your life out. Okay, that'll be a retirement, and then I'll do this, and you can just play your whole life forward and go, oh, that's not very exciting. So
Mm.
I think a bit of mystery is exciting, particularly if it's good mystery. Like, rather than thinking, oh, I might end up in prison next year, like that'd be a bit depressing. Like it's nice to have things that you know might happen, even not knowing what they might be.
And I guess then that way it's you don't become rigid to what you expect. You almost remove yourself of expectations, but rather you're open to what direction you're heading in and everything that happens along the way.
Exactly. It's always good to keep the lower your expectations, the easier it is to meet them. But hopefully you'll get a lot more.
Mate, I'm going to make sure that everywhere people can find your content, enjoy your amazing work, is in the show notes. But is there anything that you'd like to make people aware of? Stuff that you want them to, like, if there's a best place to come and follow you, and like for the next year of Outback Mike's adventures, you're like, this is the place to be.
Probably Instagram's the best place. If you're a podcast listener, if you're listening to this, I've got my own called the Outback Mike Survival and Adventure podcast. I'm interviewing Heston Russell next
Former
week.
guest of this show. He's a good man, Heston.
Yeah, I haven't actually met him, but I've communicated a fair bit. So yeah, feel free to check that out. And also my film, it's not online yet though, but I don't want to announce it. I don't know when that will be, but yeah, just go to Instagram.
Speaking of good-looking units, Heston's one of them, mate. He's built like a brick shit house, and
Yeah.
got a skincare routine to rival any other. So he's a good unit.
Yeah,
I
looks
really
like a
enjoyed
pretty
chatting to him.
fit dude. Yeah.
Oh, mate, 100%. He hasn't skipped a beat since the military.
Yeah, which is admirable. Yeah, he's got a lot of courage. I think
Absolutely.
courage under fire is the military is very good at preparing you to be courageous under fire, but having courage afterwards is like harder,
Mm,
I think. And he's had to show a lot.
absolutely, mate. This has been so much fun. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks heaps.
Cheers.